Well, good morning to everyone. It is my pleasure to greet you on behalf of the University of Alicante and welcome you to this second European Metaverse Research Network Conference, exploring the intersection of AI and the Metaverse. Let me first give the floor to Mel Slater, researcher at the Universitat de Barcelona and coordinator of the EMRN.
Okay, thanks. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you for the introduction. So this is a conference organized by the European Metaverse Research Network, and this is the second conference. We had one last year in Barcelona. I think some of you at least were there. And this year we wanted to have the theme of exploring the intersection of AI and the Metaverse. So I'm from the University of Barcelona. Our lab is called the Event Lab, and it's also in the Institute of Neurosciences. And I'd like to give thanks to all the different sponsors who have made this possible, especially the project at the top left, Derechos Digitales, and the Cátedra de Metaverse from the University of Alicante, and the various other ones. So I'd like to especially thank Aurelio López-Tarruella, I can't see with my glasses on, Tarruella. Do you want to say something at the moment before I carry? Do you want to say something first?
No, I will say afterwards.
Okay. And the various coordinators without who this would be impossible, especially Raul Ruiz and the organizing committee, the local organizing committee, and also the program committee. And all the program committee are members of this European Metaverse Research Network. So we organized this together and they reviewed the papers and so on. So the European Metaverse Research Network was set up in 2023 to carry out research in various aspects of the Metaverse concept. Notice I say concept because the Metaverse doesn't exist today. People talk about it. There's various nascent examples, but it doesn't exist in anything like the concept. So this organization was initially sponsored by Meta, who'd given some funding to 7 different institutes, and then they decided to bring these institutes together in this network, and they asked me to lead it, and I said yes. But Meta's always had a hands-off approach, like you do what you want, we're here for support. And actually, well, fair enough to say this, that since Donald Trump got elected, we've never heard anything more from Meta. So I don't know exactly how that works, but I think their priorities have moved on. So, but anyway, we're carrying on. So we carry out activities such as these meetings. We're planning to do joint research. We have this annual conference. This is the website, and also we've written a paper. This is a very long paper, like 70 pages. This is an extract from the paper in the supplementary materials, and it gives you the idea of the range of things on which we're concentrating. So the metaverse in education, in healthcare and quality of life, in business and consumers, in the future of work, and democracy and civil society. So this gives you an idea of the range of disciplines which are represented in this network. So, for example, my background is more computer science, whereas Aurelio is law. So it's quite a range of disciplines. So this paper was accepted yesterday in Frontiers in Virtual Reality, and it's all the different participants of this network have written to this paper. If you want to talk, and then I'll show the last 2 slides. Yeah, okay.
Well, there were some aspects that I wanted to deal with, in particular some concerning logistics, but I will leave it for later. But basically, one of the things that I want to highlight is the fact that I think it's for us like an obligation to host this second conference of the European Metaverse Research Network. And that's because I have to say that Mel has put so much effort in the creation of this network that we felt obliged to help you in bringing this organization into life. For the last, I would say, 2 years, probably, Mel, you have been pushing with online meetings, with dealing first with Meta, now not anymore with Meta, I would say fortunately, because we have become independent. And now we have to live for our sustainability, I would say. But you have fought for that for a long time, and again, with the organization of the conference here in Alicante is a way to support that effort and to try to create a sustainable association. So in that regard, thank you. And I fully endorse what I would say are the principles of the organization, and in particular is interdisciplinarity. I think that's essential in order to carry out a successful research in topics concerning the metaverse. Okay.
Thanks very much, and I want to reciprocate by saying without the work of the Metaverse chair, this conference wouldn't be happening. Without Aurelio and Raul's work in particular, this wouldn't be happening, and also all the other people I mentioned before locally who've been helping. So these are some scenes from last year. We had a very good time in Barcelona. These are some of the speakers and the posters and so on. The top left one is the rector of the University of Barcelona with me introducing the conference, and Marco is in the middle, Marco Gillies. You'll see him later soon, and you'll see various of the other speakers. So finally, I'd like to say welcome to Alicante, to this conference. These pictures are courtesy of Gemini, I think. I gave it all the ingredients and it produced these. And I hope we have a good time and a good productive time in terms of research and understanding of the metaverse in the next 2 days. So now I pass back to Jorge.
Well, thank you, Mel and Aurelio, for this nice introduction to the conference. So, well, let me finish this opening session by saying that, well, from the University of Alicante, we are honored to host this event. We are aware of the increasing significance of the topics that are being addressed in this conference, developments of the intersection between the metaverse and artificial intelligence. The innovative applications of augmented and virtual reality have never been more relevant, along with their societal, ethical, and legal implications regarding digital rights protection. I would like to acknowledge the project on the implementation of the Charter of Digital Rights, financed by the public entity Redes, in providing support for the organization of this conference. I hope this conference proves productive and enriching for everyone here. And my sincere thanks to all the speakers for their contributions and to all the attendees for your interest. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all. So I'm Michele Barbier. I'm from Inria, but I'm a manager and I'm an ethics expert. I'm not, I would say, a computational scientist, but I'm very happy to contribute and to propose the organization of this meeting in the context of this is not the right presentation. This one. In the context of the Meta II project, and this is where we collaborate with Mel and Mavi, but also we have Laurynas as ethics advisory, ethics member. So just to introduce, the metaverse introduce significant ethical considerations. So we have the key issues of privacy, security, personal biometric data. We also the identity questions about the authenticity and the representation, the accessibility also to the metaverse is an important question because it allows people with disabilities to maintain their social interaction. And there is also some crucial question about the preventing social inequalities and discrimination. And in this project, Meta2, that Katia will present you, we are focusing on inappropriate social interaction in the metaverse. And I think it's really important. So today we have invited our different speakers. So Katia Zibrek, she's a social scientist. Well, you know him, no need to present. We have Beatrice de Gelder. She is a philosopher and neuroscientist at Maastricht University. Laurynas is a philosopher specialized in AI and ethics at RISE in Sweden, and Mavi, I guess you know, medical doctor and neuroscientist at IDIBAPS. So maybe we can, so I will take pictures. I hope it's fine for social media. So if you don't want to appear, just let us know. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Michele. Do I move up here? Yeah. The microphone. Okay, thank you, Michele. So I'm just going to make a brief introduction to the project Meta2, just to give you a context of how this panel actually came about. So the project is basically a European-funded project that we, Michele, myself, Mavi, and Laurynas are involved in. And the idea is to transfer knowledge and technology for investigating gender-based, inappropriate social interactions in the metaverse. So I'm going to break this down. So the first is transfer of knowledge and technology. So we have 3 partners involved in this project. One is so the coordinator is the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. The coordinator is Maria Rousseau. And we're also partnering with IDIBAPS and Inria. So IDIBAPS, the medical neuroscience research, they're on the side of neuroscience and medical research in XR, and Inria is basically providing the technology and the informatics side of this research question. And so we are interested in the metaverse, where we already heard that it's not as developed at the moment, but perhaps in the future this is something that will be a little bit more spread out. So right now it does exist. So we have some examples that are popular, such as VR Chat, Horizon Metaverse, Meta Horizon. So it's an expansive, immersive virtual realm for socializing, work, and also entertainment. So people can meet in these platforms and exchange knowledge, or they can just work together or just socialize. And basically the last thing that we are interested in is of course, the harassment problem that happens in these platforms. So we know that there have been reports that got into media and got the attention of the police and also the lawyers, because they didn't know what to do in the case where people are being harassed in the metaverse. It's mainly targeted towards female avatars or female users. That's why we speak about gender-based inappropriate social interactions, but of course these inappropriate interactions are very broad. It can range from anything to just trying to annoy somebody to actually extort or get their identity. So there's a bigger problem at stake, but we basically target more or less gender-based inappropriate interactions. So we have 2 research axes. The Inria axis is we're trying to explore the avatar environment characteristics that could potentially be involved in the inappropriate behavior. And we also want to design and evaluate interaction techniques to mitigate this kind of behavior. So we have, right now, what we're doing is we're first building a taxonomy of safety tools, particularly targeted at verbal harassment and sound harassment. So there's a lot of taxonomies already existing in the area of safety tools. So when you are in the metaverse, when you are interacting with other people, you have the option to basically select people that are harassing you, and you can mute them. And these safety tools work more or less well, but they can be very awkward to use, or people don't remember to use them, or they don't know how to get into the menu. And especially when you're under stress and you don't know where the threat is coming from, you may not have the time to actually find the person, select them, mute them, and so on. So we're doing a bit of an exploration of what is existing, what kind of safety tools are the most appropriate to use in this situation. And the experiment plan we have is to actually simulate a harassment situation. And we want to simulate verbal harassment, and we want to give people the tools to protect themselves. And we want to explore different kind of tools to see which one is most efficient. And of course here with this experiment design, we also have some ethical concerns of which we're going to discuss later. On the side of IDIBAPS, there's a research axis which mainly deals with harassment prevention through empathy. So there's two methods they use there, so perspective taking, and also the bystander behavior. So you are the observer of a harassment situation in VR, and you have the chance to step forward to kind of prevent it, or you basically experience how it feels to be in the third person perspective. So I believe there's a poster related to that later on by Isaac, so be sure to check it out if you want to know more about this research. But I'm just going to briefly also discuss the ethical approach of the Meta2 project, and it's also the reason why we're here today, is that our project is giving special attention to the ethics, of course, because it's a delicate subject. And we actually created also, thanks to Michele, we created an external ethics advisory committee. Laurynas is part of this committee as well, to discuss these ethical issues, specifically to XR, the use of avatars in Metaverse. And we want to raise awareness, such as talks like these and webinars. We talk to researchers and also the general public. And we hope to produce at the end a white paper to the European Commission with the findings that we have found through research and through the discussion with the committee. So I'll leave it to Michele to take over the panel.
Yes, so the way the panel will be organized, we will have two talks. So we will start with Beatrice, who will give a viewpoint, 10 minutes. Then Laurynas will present his work, and then we can have discussion. And I really wish that you will be actively participating, so I will stay with you, and then you will feel obliged. So, Beatrice, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it works.
It's okay, you have it here.
Ah, I have it here. Okay, all right. Can I move on here? Okay. Good. Thanks very much for having me here. I tried to make some sense in the context of this. Very, very interesting and broad topic.
You can use this.
Okay. By way of example, I'm going to show a little bit of data from a study we actually started in 2018, Mavi, long time ago, huh? Which I think at that time was the first virtual reality study that was done in an MRI scanner. And it took us a while, but it all worked out, and it was quite interesting. Now, why is this relevant? It's relevant because we have heard just in the presentation the focus on harassment, and in a way, this study sort of looked at the mirror situation of it, namely, we started from harassment in real life, not harassment in virtual reality, harassment in real life, and then we created a virtual reality situation that mimicked the harassment situation in real life, created it in virtual reality, and we try to see what happens when two participants are in this harassment confrontation in virtual reality. Because our goal was really to understand, we all sort of believe, and we all know from experience that virtual reality works, except we don't understand what works means. I mean, what does it do? What does it do to the person? What does it do to the environment? What does it do to the brain? I mean, our goal was really to understand what makes virtual reality work in the brain, and we still are at the beginning of understanding that, frankly. I mean, so just to give you an example. So we had this study which was based on some work Mavi had been doing already, and we had. In virtual reality, in the scanner, we had a situation of somebody this was domestic violence, which is of course a specific case of social harassment, but nevertheless a very representative and apparently a very frequent one. And we had the situation of an aggressor that physically intrudes the personal space of the victim, and we wanted to know what happened. We simulated this approaching of a social threat using virtual reality training. We had two different perspectives, because that's also an important factor there. We had two conditions, namely in one condition, you as a person in the scanner equipped with the VR goggles, you were observing somebody being harassed by somebody else, or in the other condition, you were actually previously embodied to be the victim of the harassment, okay? Which are two very different situations, and could both be addressed in this situation. So you see, we actually try to map the approach of the harassing person to the victim by contrasting, let's say, what is called social space, the aggressor coming closer, that would be personal space, and then coming very close into intimate space. I don't worry too much about these colorful brains. The point is to show you that indeed we can track in the brain activity the specifics of this interaction. I'm just going to put one, yeah, and we do find that we can fairly easily map the difference that it makes to be a passive observer or to be oneself. Adopting the first person perspective. So both perspectives are actually relevant. Like when a policeman is called to a house, he is going to be the observer of the harassment. When somebody is actually undergoing or being exposed to the harassment, is going to have this first person perspective. Of course, it's important to know what are the factors that make a difference between those two differences, and we can very clearly map for this kind of aggressive behavior, which takes place over 1.5 minute. We can very clearly map the differences in brain activities as the aggressor gets closer, moving from social space to personal space to intimate space. And that next thing, we find that there are clear differences between the first person and the third person exposure. Nevertheless, also in the third person, when you're just an observer, we see very clear marks of the kind of aggression people are subject to. Very specifically, of course, this is going to be the case given that this domestic violence. We see, for example, the differences between males and females, which for female participants in first-person perspective very clearly generate some amygdala activity as a marker of the experience of the aggression. It is different. The males do not react to the same way. We had, of course, 50-50 male and female participants, and for male participants, we don't find this increasing activation of the fear reaction when the aggressor approaches intimate space. So, what's to be learned from this for me, and this is for me what was quite intriguing was to see how. I'm just taking this one aspect now, not developing the threat aspect, which is maybe more obvious. But what I found quite impressive was that we can actually, in virtual space, see this difference between an encounter in personal space, in social space, or over an intimate space. Because physically, you would say the kind of aggression taking place in when I get close, in physical space, in a real space, you can sort of understand that. But what I found intriguing, certainly at that time, was that this experience of space, because of space, is transferred from daily experience to the virtual space. We followed that up. With yes, we very much did found similar findings about how space, the fragmentation of space, the psychological fragmentation of space, is experienced in very similar ways in the real space and in virtual space. That was a different study. I don't have to go into that in the interest of time. In a more recent study, we again tried to see what are the factors that are taking place. And here we added an element which we couldn't do in the scanner. This was not a scanning study, but an EEG study. And here we used, here we used what you see there in the bottom left of the photo is a power platform, because here we could actually see to what extent being in virtual space, because you see this is EEG combined with virtual reality and some physiological measures, and the person is standing on a platform that will measure micro movements like retreat, move sideways movements, etc. Okay, and we see how the interaction in virtual reality, which is seen, of course, through the HDM, actually makes the person make the kind of movements, even micro movements. Because, of course, there are no major movements since everything happens in virtual reality, but the physical body will kind of make the forward, the backward bending, the sideways gestures that are typical of interactions in real world. So, yeah, this kind of body sway measures. So. Related to that, one thing, we talk a lot about social interactions, but we recently wrote a chapter on that, and we try to figure out what people understand by social interactions. And aside from the common sense meaning of the term, it's not very clear. So we did an experiment. I don't have data of that, but it's rather important. What makes a social interaction beyond the trivial definition that two people are facing each other? I mean, how much is faced, what people now call unhappily facedness? How much is that an important aspect of social interaction? Do we only two people just standing next to each other? We already call that a social interaction. I mean, what kind of reciprocity has there to be for being social? Do people have to be involved in the same movement? I mean, to what extent is the brain predicting a social interaction when there is not yet a social interaction and being engaged in it? I mean, has there to be an attribution of a common purpose, of a common goal? I mean, how do interactions generate? Are they generated by the environment? Are some generated by the intended action of some of the participants, etc. We recently did an EEG study where people are watching a short video clip, and then the video clip stops, and they get just one frame of a possible interaction. So for all conditions of the experiment, they see the same still image, but how their brain reacts to that still image is absolutely a function of the video they have seen before. So there are some characteristics of social interaction in the brain that are projected upon the presence of one person looking at another person without actually that information being in the image. So that may be one important aspect for. I don't think I have more image to show, but that's in that. So I think in cognitive or affective, whatever you want to call it, neuroscience, social interaction is a very recent topic. It is a little bit surprising. There is relatively currently very little work. It's rapidly increasing, but so far there was very little work in neuroscience on how the brain deals with social interactions. There's of course a lot of perception of individuals, a lot of emotion perception of individuals, but social interaction itself is a fairly novel topic. And in a current study where we are manipulating the different factors, the distance between the actors, the yes or no engagement in a common activity. I mean, is it a social interaction when one person is eating and another person is drinking? So to what extent has there to be that kind of reciprocity or engagement in because the common sense is so rich and so powerful at projecting social interaction upon people that we really have to understand this kind of mechanism before we can more effectively probably design effective VR interventions of various kinds.
Thank you, Beatrice. So, thank you very much. Maybe while Laurynas is installing for the next talk, if there is one question for Beatrice, if you want.
Hi, thank you. Very interesting talk. So, yeah, I've been really always fascinated by social interaction and how do we sort of study them. But I think recently there is this, maybe I'll start from this angle, like, what do you think social interaction or the kind of things you're studying is kind of more innate, like more something we were born with? Or do you see lots of culture difference, gender difference, difference in age, and also do you see some kind of change in the way people socially engage with each other because of the impact of social media? Or do you think, that there are things that actually remains and we should kind of try to stick to marrying those things or try to understand both? Just a picture of how kind of it reacts to sort of the culture and how they change over time. What do you think about this?
Well, is this one working? Well, there's certainly going to be. I mean, the human brain. I mean, it's not the human brain, but human and non-human species are strongly wired for social interactions. I mean, that's absolutely true because it's simply a necessity. I mean, you cannot divide. So what that just consists of is an important important topic of study. Some people have argued that is actually just like some properties of visual perception. There are some properties of social perception that are hardwired in the brain. I mean, for me, that's a pretty vacuous claim. I prefer to say that there is a strong pre-wiring for seeing social interactions when there may not even be some yet. Certainly, culture will have an impact on that, but that doesn't mean.
There's two different things that we can measure.
I mean,
that is,
I mean, social media. If anything, social media certainly illustrate the interest the brain has in social interaction, right? Mm. I mean, why are we so fascinated by looking at other people all the time? I mean, what's so great about it's like a strong impetus to there's something to be said about it. But okay.
Thank you. Laurynas?
Yes, hello, my name is Laurynas Adomaitis, and I'm sorry to interject into the discussion. We had a discussion going, but I'll say a few things and we'll go back to the discussion. The topic I want to discuss today is moral equivalence in the metaverse. What is moral equivalence? For me, the big question is, are we responsible for our actions in the virtual reality in the same way as we are responsible for them in the non-virtual reality? So are our actions equivalent? Do we carry an equivalent responsibility for our actions? It's a difficult question. I don't think we can answer it very easily, but I'll say what I think. I'll be philosophical, I'll put forward my hypothesis, and then we can bring it up for discussion. So let's start with this scenario. We have a robot who is handing a lady some magazines. The lady is looking at the robot. It's a nice scenario. There doesn't seem to be a problem with this, right? But when I show this to robotics people, they say there is a huge problem. Well, look at that. The lady is interacting with the robot. She's in the contact zone with the robot, almost touching the fingers of the robot. And it's a big no-no. It's a big safety concern because the robot can take your finger off in half a second. And it's even worse because she is not controlling that contact zone. So she's not looking at where she's touching the robot. She's looking into the eyes of the robot. Why? Why is that happening? Well, I think it's because the lady is projecting certain qualities to the robot. So she's thanking them, she's engaging with a smile, and you see that the robot is kind of smiling too. But of course, the robot is not smiling. The robot is just designed in this way. But when we see a face, when we have this faceness, we project certain qualities onto the robot. But of course, not all robots are the same. Here is another example of a robot that collects the strawberries in a field and carries them to the truck. What is the difference between these two robots? Well, one looks like a human and another one doesn't. What I want to bring out of this comparison is that some qualities of the robots, both robots, are real, and some qualities of the robots are projected, or they come from our human projection of emotions, of responsibility, of personhood, of subjecthood onto the robot. So some qualities are real and some qualities are relational because they arise from humans interacting with these machines. And these two sides represent kind of two main philosophies of the virtual reality by Hui and Chalmers. They're kind of competing, but also both have good foundations, in my opinion. So for Chalmers, of course, virtual reality is real. It is just as our reality is based on atoms and quarks and so on, virtual reality is based in software code and hardware that hosts that code. So it's the equivalent status of reality, is just based in different causal powers. But that's not good reason enough to separate them or say that one is more real than the other. So they are equivalent in all counts. There is another view that says, well, virtual reality is not really real, but it becomes real when humans enter into it and start interacting with it, and we give meaning to this virtual reality, and it becomes real in relation to humans, but not by itself. So there is this split. Okay, where do I stand? I used to be very much on the relational side, but I'm moving over, or I'm having doubts. So I'm changing my mind, in part because of the research by Beatrice and others that showed me something pretty interesting. So here is what I think. This is the best guess, best informed guess I can have today. I think realism has strong evidence in the effects of virtual actions and virtual reality. So for example, in the case of harassment, we see the really real neurological effects that virtual harassment has on people. And debatably, I think that the difference is, it's difficult to measure harassment in real time in the real world, but it seems that it has a very real effect on people. And it's not only harassment. I think many social interactions, our actions in the virtual reality do have a very real effect on people. And in that sense, it's not just a projection. It's not just a game. It's not just fictional. It can have a very real effect, and our actions can have very real consequences. So realism makes sense to me in that perspective. But relationism makes sense to me from the perspective of ethics, ethical subjecthood, and ethical responsibility. So, like with the lady and the robot, well, the robot is not reflecting its actions. Just as the avatar is not reflecting its actions, it's not making reflective choices. And therefore, we cannot really hold the avatar or the robot accountable for their actions. There might be a human behind the avatar who is reflecting and who can be held responsible, but it's not the avatar itself. And this is where I see a split. This is where relationism makes sense to me. So an avatar has ethical dimension, subjecthood and responsibility in relation to us, so in relation to our projection of these responsibilities on the avatar. But by itself, it is not reflecting and not responsible. So from that perspective, relationism makes sense. Can they be combined? I don't know. They seem to be incompatible. And I don't know what to do with this. Happy to, open to discussing it further. I wonder what people in the field think. Despite this inconsistency or lack of clarity on this, I think there is responsibility for virtual actions. So if you do something in the virtual world, you are responsible for the actions of your avatar. Why? Well, one argument, and this applies even for single person scenarios, doesn't even need to be a metaverse, it can be a single agent environment. Of course, this argument famously comes from Philip Bray, and that is, well, if you do despicable things in the virtual world, you damage yourself, and therefore you are responsible for it. So if you kill and rape and ravage in these even game-like scenarios, but it's so immersive that it impacts your own moral development, it impacts your own perceptions. And this carries on to the real world, so you are responsible for damaging yourself, even if you don't hurt anybody else. The second reason why you are responsible for virtual actions is that you may cause real damage and real suffering, like in the case of sexual harassment, to other people. And if you cause suffering to other people, you are responsible for causing that suffering. So this, to me, is less controversial. I don't know how. I get the argument number one for the responsibility, but I'm not fully convinced. I don't know how much perverted you become because of committing violent acts in the virtual world. I don't know. I would like to hear more about it. I can be convinced. It makes sense to me, but I want to see more evidence, I think. For the second, it just makes sense. If you cause suffering, you're responsible for it. And lastly, if you're responsible for these actions should have consequences. If you cause suffering, something should happen to you. The big question is, well, what? What should happen to you? And two options are material consequences. So for you as a person, something needs to happen. You need to get a fine, you need to go to jail, you need to have something happen to you. Maybe your access to the internet can be blocked or whatever. And of course, in very serious crimes, in actual sexual harassment, I think you can involve police, and there are cases where this makes sense in the real world. But some actions might not warrant a material consequence. They might warrant a virtual consequence, something like the virtual jail, muting, blocking, maybe the famous meta bubble, or, you can set a bubble. There are these other more virtual means for producing consequences for the actions. And we don't have a good answer. When is material consequences appropriate? When is virtual consequences appropriate? In every case, I think the responsibility for your actions does imply consequence. So something should happen to you. But the nature of these consequences is still an open question to me. So, Michele, if you don't mind, I suggest leaving these open questions on the screen, and maybe we can open the discussion surrounding them.
Yeah. So, indeed, I would like to raise, the first point you were raising. So, do we consider, and please participate, I will first ask our panelists. I saw Beatrice writing a lot of notes, and Mavi and Mel. So do we consider virtual actions as physical actions? And if we agree with Chalmer, yeah. Do we want a police force in the metaverse? Should the action be criminal and be treated as such in the metaverse? And is it acceptable to use AI agent to try to identify and mitigate harassment? So those we can find those same questions. So maybe Beatrice, would you like to start?
Well, I was a little bit intrigued by. I mean, ethics is of course always about foundations of behavior, and I was a little bit intrigued to hear the link made between ethics and the question of realism. I find that I'm a little bit puzzled by that, and also the way this evolved into some kind of consequentialist view on ethics. I mean, your actions are good or bad to the extent that their consequences are good or bad. I mean, that's certainly one specific position in the history of ethics, and certainly not. So that I was a little bit intrigued by. It is, of course, important to clarify these issues if we expect behavior interventions based on virtual reality to have an impact. And that's a very big open question still. But I would not. Also, you might of course decide that it's time to step away from these very individualistic past century notions of defining criteria for ethical behavior, which is still very much what I hear in your presentation.
Yeah, please.
Can I? Yeah, I think Beatrice, very good point. I think the ethics for the metaverse doesn't need to be consequentialist, because we can certainly have categorical rules and say, well, killing is bad, and you go into the metaverse and you play those violent games and you kill. Well, you shouldn't kill. So it's just a rule. It doesn't matter that you don't hurt anyone or there are no consequences. You still shouldn't, because this is a bad thing to do.
Well, but you might then say it's not a bad thing to do in the non-real world.
Yeah. So well, that's where realism
so I don't
comes in.
I don't think the contrast between real and virtual is going to help us very much out of this.
Perhaps not, but
I mean, from the point of view of the ethical behavior of an individual, there is only one reality, namely the reality of the ethical norms. Whether this is, I mean, this is not a universal viewpoint, but it strikes me as certainly a tenable, an arguable position.
yes,
I mean, the ethics of my behavior are defined by my ethical stances,
yes,
and not by their implementation on Mars or in virtual reality.
I totally agree. I would say it's also your ethical reflection and the choices that you make, and this is what ethics for a person is about. But when we go into the realm of the accountability of producing consequences for the actions, for which not you are responsible, or not solely you, but somebody else might get involved, an authority or somebody who will produce these consequences, then usually consequentialist frameworks play a role. So you need to show some kind of harm that's been done to be able to then produce consequences for these actions. Because if there is no harm, it's difficult to say, well, this should happen to you now. We should stop Beatrice from accessing the internet for the next month because she's done something, right? So we need to show some harm that has been caused.
Just to keep in the background, I just want to add a little thing. We focus now on virtual reality and all the kinds of bad things or good things I can do in virtual reality. But of course, this topic has a much longer history. Like when I read novels, I enjoy people killing each other. So fiction has always been, should we treat virtual reality as some fiction, and put the discussion in the history of what fiction has, the role fiction has played. I see the continuity there rather than any kind of real, unreal situation. Sorry.
I just had a question. Yeah, I don't know, I just used to use it. Stop using it. But you talk about consequences, but in a virtual reality world, can't you just take off the like ability to rape, like in the definition of the world. So you prevent it by not allowing it. It depends on the games, like friendly fire or things like that. You just take it off beforehand, so it wouldn't.
Can I? Yeah, I think that's a great point, and some things might be disabled in this way, but there is a risk and a thin line that we're walking here, because things can be over-policed. Suddenly we can end up in a very sterile environment that is boring and people don't want to use it, and it's not fun anymore because nothing is allowed. I cannot get close to a person, I cannot interact, I cannot face them, I cannot. So if we step over this line, suddenly you just lose your user base and you lose that the fun aspect.
There's also a difference between maybe not allowing people to get close to each other and allowing somebody to be able to take their pants off in virtual reality.
But can I just quickly come in here? That's a very important thing. To what extent you talk about policing the internet, but on the other hand, there is not enough research, for example, on the side of psychiatry, to see to what extent there is a cathartic and therapeutic function of people living out their fantasies. I mean, big.
Do you want on the same topic? Or?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Without my okay. So I have. Thank you for presentations. I have one small question. In my view, that the main difference between real work and virtual work is that now is that you can easily turn off virtual work. In any time you can go to this virtual world and go out of this virtual world. So you can choose different virtual worlds, whatever you want, more healthy, less healthy. So this is your choice. But you cannot choose the real world itself because we have only one real world. And according to this thought, that I have a question. So do we really need to punish people, or do people have to have consequences on bad behavior or something like that? Because person can choose, is it appropriate for me or not, and turn off in any times. We can do it in virtual world, we can do it in real world. That's why in real world we need to do some punishment, but do we really need to do it in VR? That's the question.
You can get is there an answer?
No, go ahead.
Please.
Well, I mean, of course, this is a very important and interesting topic with many different angles, and I agree with you that one can switch that off, and of course, this is an important aspect. However, as Beatrice mentioned in her talk, I mean, really, even if we know that this virtual, the impact on the brain and the response that we perceive if we are attacked or harassed by someone is close to reality. So this is real. And then you may wonder, do we need to have bullies in the virtual, in the metaverse? No, is this allowed? Of course, people can switch it off, and this is great. But I think, on the other hand, you may not want to have systematic inappropriate behavior. So also, I don't think these people should go to prison. I think that we are in a faculty of law, and there is a lot that can be regulated there. And of course, it can be very specific to the environment. It's not the same to be in a virtual office than in a virtual hospital or in a virtual nightclub. And the allowed behavior is going to be different. But one could punish in the virtual world, like it can be restrict the access if you don't have right behavior and so on, because there can be people with systematic bullying behavior there, and I don't think that is fair either. So yeah, but I mean, there are many interesting aspects to discuss.
Thank you. So we had one question, and then after. Yeah, no, it's fine. And then I come to you, and then we can have
Thank you for your presentations. I feel interested in these topics as a criminal lawyer, so I'm going to jump in. Okay, we speak about responsibility, consequences. We have to distinguish, of course, if it's like civil damages or if it's criminal damages. Criminal damages, criminal liability needs something more, of course, right? And we have to understand to which extent the harm is caused. So is it a physical harm? We want to compare like a virtual crime, or is it just a virtual crime? So is it a third typology of crime, like not digital, not physical, but virtual, and then it has to be regulated as such? But then how should we regulate it? On which basis? Like, okay, harm, just mental, psychological, or rather physical? And this, I think, neurosciences in this are like crucial because it helps to understand what is the physical impact to a harm that is actually psychological, because it stays in the digital realm. And if I can also say something about what he said, like basically virtual reality is a third realm compared to digital, right? So on Facebook or on Instagram, we punish and we sanction bad behaviors. A libel is punished. If I keep on texting you, harassing you, it's punished criminally. Then virtual reality, in theory, has another level of immersivity, so it's even worse than that. But we have to understand, I think, to which impact this causes harm. However, like just to jump in and please let me know what you think, because that's an interesting dialogue. How would you fit the criminal liability in this? Like, to which perspective? Physical, psychological? How would we ground the harm? That's a constitutional, of course, principle that there has to be a harm to an actual good, right? So what would be the good after which prosecuting? That's the key question that, honestly, so far, I didn't find in virtual reality. It's really difficult to answer this. So, thank you.
Beatrice, you are the expert on this, I think.
Oh, yeah? Well...
You measured all the brains.
No, I mean, by measuring the brain, you don't derive ethical norms, right? I mean, that's for sure. There is two very different viewpoints. One is to be pragmatic. And pragmatic means you actually have developed tools to measure the consequences of people's actions, right? Another much extreme radical position is to say, well, it's all a matter of the intent. So we have on the one end of the continuum, you have, I will develop tools to measure, pragmatism, I will develop tools to measure the consequences of people's actions. Real, virtual, that doesn't make a radical difference there. A totally different viewpoint is ethics is in the intent. And then there's also no difference between real and virtual killings. So society develops, obviously, but develops a totally pragmatic, reasonably pragmatic approach to this. And see, I can research is needed that allows me to measure the consequences of people's actions, the impact of people's actions on themselves, on each other, and on society. Remember, these discussions are very old. In the 50s, there is literature from the 50s centered on the topic whether it was going to damage young people's, kids' health when they watched violent TV programs. And the consequences of those studies are really not clear. I've sort of looked that up a while ago, and it's not clear. I mean, the common sense said, oh no, kids can't watch crime, can't watch all that. And then it turned out that it had no impact. Other studies showed it had an impact, so we are really facing big questions, but not actually questions that are that new.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I would maybe add... not answer your question, but add more complexity and confusion to it. And I think when we discuss things like, the user can always plug out, so is it really harm? Maybe if they stay, they kind of like being in this edgy space. Maybe they want to be confronted and explain. So I think we postulate a thing that doesn't exist. We postulate a user who is perfectly rational, makes decisions in a split second, and is able to choose what is best for them at all times, which is not the case, not the reality, because sometimes you don't realize that you're being harassed or damaged until it's kind of too late. And sometimes you have a user group who are not fully autonomous and rational and can make these decisions. A good example of that is, I don't know, it used to be the biggest online platform. I don't know if it's still the biggest, Roblox, with a lot of questionable things going on, including for sure grooming activities, for sure child labor activities, gambling activities. And okay, well, if it's bad for the kids, why do they stay? They can always log out. Well, that's, we disregard these irrational, manipulative elements from our decision making then, and I think we shouldn't. We should be more empathetic to the victim and see why they ended up there. I don't think anybody wants to end up there, but they do, and so they are becoming the victims. And this should be kind of, I think, considered in the criminal side of things. So how much did the victim, how much autonomy did they have? How much could they have controlled, or did they control? But we shouldn't always, assume that all the users are rational and they're just able to, escape or log out or implement on any of these filters or tools, because sometimes you just can't.
Okay, thank you. We have so the microphone is up, so just speak very loudly, please, and then so we have a question to you.
Thank you. It's a very fundamental question that you are asking. In part, I think, because of such topics as the nature of the social contract that people enter into when they go inside. 1. 2, the nature of assault. Assault can be linguistic. Usually there is the implication of bodily harm, but it's a body. So I think the third question is, what is the nature of the body? Such that in the virtual reality, we still have our body, this one, but the nature of a body, if a person were paralyzed and they were incapable of feeling pain, but their body could be harmed. If a person could feel pain, but they're not paralyzed, like us. Sorry, I don't want to get lost on what a body is. Just to say, however, that we may have a parochial definition of the body. We have a parochial definition of assault because it's related to certain communications channels that are being changed, and we have a need to define social contracts better. Any topic with which I would love to hear an answer.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really interesting perspective, and I totally agree. From an ethics perspective, social contract is oftentimes discussed in the political foundations, kind of the freedoms, the type of freedoms you give up when you join some social order, and I think maybe the metaverse could be an example of that. So, there are rules. If you want to join our metaverse, you give up some freedoms. It's not like, I can come and do whatever I like. No, if you want to be here and you want to participate, you give up freedoms. And so that means you are also protected, of course, but you need to give up something. One thing. Another thing about ethics, I wonder about this image. And one kind of ethical theory that really relates to the faceness was developed by Emmanuel Levinas. And it says the foundation of all ethical interaction is based on the face. So for us to be able to be responsible for each other and interact on an ethical level, we both need to have a face. And when I look into a face, that's already an ethical interaction. So it is, in essence, bodily. It needs to have a face. And here we see that the lady is looking into the face of a robot. And Levinas says, when you look into a person's face, this ethical relationship appears because a person's face is telling you always one thing: don't kill me. So when you are looking into someone's face, it's already an imperative: don't destroy me, don't kill me, I have a face. And I wonder how transferable it is to the metaverse. Does an avatar have a face? I think that's an excellent question.
Yes, I'd like to comment on the issue of the body that was raised by the person in the audience. So, of course, in virtual reality, we can program it so that when you look down, you see a body. When you move, the body moves with you. If something touches your virtual body, you feel it on your real body. And there's lots and lots of work that shows that people have the strong illusion that this is my body. Of course, you know it's not cognitively, but certainly at perceptual level, you have the illusion this is my body. And there's also been lots of work that shows that if that virtual body is attacked, you feel it. So there's been brain imaging studies that show people, and EEG studies, and simply observing someone. You have your virtual hand and a saw comes down to cut it, you move your hand away. So you know it's not going to really hurt you, you know that cognitively, but you can't help it. So I think the body in virtual reality is really critical, and if someone attacks your virtual body, even though there's no physical harm that I can see on my real body, there's no bruises or cuts or anything, you've still been harmed. And I want to come back to the thing that you had up on your last slide, which was 3.1 and 3.2. So I think 3.2 is really clear. 3.2 is really clear. If you cause harm, whether verbally or in some kind of pseudo-physical way that you're attacked, then yes, this is a crime. Number one, I was not sure about, and just before we came here, we were having coffee together, some of us, and Mavi brought up the issue of this play that was on many years ago called The Nether, about a man who was acting out his pedophile fantasies in virtual reality, and was that a crime? And it, on the one hand, yeah, he's not actually called with virtual victims. There's no real victims involved. You can say, well, this is entirely virtual. It's up to him. No problem. He's living out his fantasies. He won't do it in the real world. But now, because of what you said, I'd like to make the analogy with taking a drug. So suppose someone's taking a drug, like, I don't know, say cannabis. So on many countries, this is illegal, and you can say they shouldn't take cannabis, or they could stop whenever you like. There's no victims whatsoever. Somebody takes the cannabis. But of course, some people who take cannabis will go on to develop some schizophrenia, for example. This connection is well known that it's prevalent in some people. So it can do them self-harm. It's banned partly for that reason, that taking cannabis is harmful. But also the other side of it is that there's a whole industry behind. If somebody takes cannabis, there's a whole industry behind it. Where do they get it from? Somebody produced it. Where did they get it? Somebody's making a load of money from it, and so on. And it will be imagined that with the pedophilia, there's a whole industry behind making these pedophilic, whatever you would say, virtual reality scenarios. And this is like something I find disgusting, and it shouldn't be encouraged. And therefore, from what you've said, I've come down on the side of saying no. Even though people are acting out of fantasy, it may cause them harm. We don't know. I think the brain studies would show that probably it does. And also, it encourages this whole criminal industry behind it. And my last point is related to this. It's going to depend a lot on the individual, whether it causes them harm. Sylvia Pan here, she was involved in developing a game based on a very famous TV series in the UK. And I bought it. I bought this game. And the first thing they asked me to do in the game, a virtual character said to me, go in that room, there's a guy there sitting in an office, shoot him. A bit like The Godfather, like go in, shoot him and come out. And I went in the room and I saw this man sitting there, a virtual man, and I couldn't shoot him. And I couldn't get any further in the game because I hadn't done that aspect of the game. So for me, this would be a harmful act to me that I couldn't do. For other people, yeah, they'd happily shoot them. So it also depends on the individual.
You want to make So I would like to make a point, even when it's been implicit in all these comments, but I think there are two aspects. One is to have inappropriate behavior in the virtual worlds and how this should be regulated and so on. And the other one is the exchange with the behavior in the real world. So what are the implications? How is this going to affect? For example, if one person is a pedophile in the virtual world, and this is okay in the sense that there is no real physical victim, but what is going to be the impact in his or her behavior in the real world? Is it going to encourage the pedophile behavior? Is it going to decrease it because it was already satisfied in the virtual world? So this is just one example, but we think there is this impact. So even when you mentioned that there was this concern, for example, in the 50s of whether watching movies with a lot of criminal actions was going to have an impact, and at the end it didn't have this impact, or so we think. But it's very different. Now we are talking about these situations with virtual embodiment, with perspective taken, is very immersive. And we know it has an impact that we transfer, and as researchers, we use this impact in a positive way. So we want to enhance empathy, and we see we can measure this enhanced empathy. And so we actually know for sure that we can change behavior in the real world by providing certain experiences in the virtual world. So therefore, we know there is some of this transfer of behavior, and I think what it needs a lot of it calls for research in the sense of how is going to be this transfer of behavior. So I think there are these two different aspects that I want to separate: the transfer of behavior between the real and the virtual world, and also the behavior in the virtual world per se.
I just would like to add, as Mavi said, we really need research to understand what the implications are. But for the time being, I would be in favor of applying policing. You used the term along very similar lines in real and in virtual worlds, because the virtual is a bit of a misleading thing, and of course depends on your the kind of ethics motive foundations you have. But if ethics is related to the action intentions, then I don't see any difference between an action in the real and in the virtual world. And I think that's a sort of important point. And in that virtual reality is just a new tool to achieve behavior modifications. It's not all that radical different from others. It's new technological opportunities. It's a new tool, absolutely, but I don't think we're going to clarify where we stand as a society with respect to it by contrasting real and virtual reality.
So I know there are more questions, but we are running out of time. So the panelists will be here until tomorrow, so really encourage you to continue. So I just wanted to maybe Mel to talk about this golden rule embodiment.
Maybe we shouldn't, because we've moved on.
Okay, so we go back. There was you had a question.
I just want to. Hello. Follow up on the real versus the virtual. In the real world, if someone stands very close to me, I feel uncomfortable and it could constitute harassment, and they may look at me. In the virtual world, has there been research to show how far someone is before it becomes perceived? as harassment or uncomfortable. I wondered whether, what research has been done to say that there is an equivalence.
But that's just what we showed in that and in subsequent studies, that this contrast, which can be quantified in physical terms, in time or distance, that it works along very similar lines in virtual and in real.
Yes, we also, there's been many studies that show that, but in particular we reproduced Hall's findings of these different zones of closeness, and we found that just as he predicted, the skin conductance goes up as a function of how close someone comes. One of my own early experiences of virtual reality, mixed virtual reality, where you share it with another person, it was very, very simple avatars, that he came very close to me, and I was shocked how it affected me, just like it would in real life. So there's a lot of work that shows that that's true. Yeah.
Hola. Okay. I wanted to ask about the topic of consequences, because you said you mentioned that there are like virtual consequences and real consequences. And when I think about virtual consequences like muting or banning or stuff like that, I think when I play video games with my friends and they insulted a lot and they got banned constantly. It's something that it does not work for them. For many people, they just continue with bad behaviors because the punishment is just not being able to speak. So when you enter in a harassing situation in the virtual world, for the person who is committing the harassment, probably he is understanding the experience as a game, as something that with lower degree of consequences. But for the person that is being harassed, the interaction is real, and she can feel like as it was real. So I feel that here there's a difference between the expected consequences for both groups in that sense. One will expect the consequences of a video game, which is just muting, so he can behave like more salvage because it's in a video game, but for the other person it will be so real. I think that projects that use like perspective taking and stuff like that are really important because they show you the harasser, how it affects the person, but how you manage this difference on the expected consequences.
Yeah, very good question. I think what you're saying is that for some person being online, saying a few things that are offensive is nothing, and they don't expect it to go anywhere or to offend anyone that much, maybe a little bit, but just a little bit. But for somebody who is maybe sensitive to that sort of language, that situation, maybe due to their previous experiences, it can be really damaging, really harming. And I would be on the side of caution then. What it boils down to, and what Mavi was saying, there is a certain lack of empathy in the scenario, I think, from the harasser, because they expect it to be low consequence. Why? Just because it's fun, it's just a little thing. But they do not involve the patient, the victim, into this reflection. If they did, they would realize, but how about this, or how about that scenario, or how about that person who is, of that gender, of that race, or has experienced something before. So if you calculate that empathic view, so imagining yourself being in the same receiving end, this could change things. But of course, as you know very well, online platforms are not a very polite and nice place to be. A lot of the content that is on there is negative, it is offensive, and it is a problem. So I don't know how can we completely get rid of offensive content. I don't know. But it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be consequences. I think there should be consequences for producing that content.
Sorry, I just want to add a little bit to that. Sorry for interrupting you. But yeah, so there are, first of all, I think what's important also in Metaverse is that we don't ask ourselves how the person perceives the message. So there's not a lot of studies on that. We built safety tools to protect people from being harassed, but some people don't perceive it as harassment, even though in some other case, if it was someone else, they would really feel that this was not appropriate. So subjective interpretation of harassment is important, and it's not regulated in the metaverse, of course, because it's difficult to regulate that. And on another topic, I think there's also, I think Laurynas touched upon the subject, is that maybe something happens to you and you think, well, it's virtual, so it doesn't really affect me. But there are emotional consequences. And there's then another layer, which I also wanted to discuss, is that if society tells you, yes, you've been harassed, you may perceive it as harassment. But if the society says, no, it's just a game, why are you so affected? You may say, okay, maybe I had a bad reaction, but it should be fine. So there's so many layers to that. And even in one of the case where there was a rape victim in virtual reality, she was actually saying that she didn't want to stop the experience because she was interested to see what's going to happen next. Because she knew, no, this can't be true. So she stayed in that position, being harassed, and just kept going because, oh, they're really doing this. Oh, okay, this is interesting. And she completely nullified her emotional experience. So in a way, there's so many complexity to that I think even with safety tools, we don't know how to address yet. So, if that helps.
Okay, super quickly. I wanted to take it on another level, maybe a linguistic level, maybe it's a concept level, but we are speaking about reality or not realism or not realism as the key, maybe the key, and I think it's going well with the previous intervention. Maybe we can use these couple of words, simulation and authenticity, because if we perceive it as a simulation, then we give a completely different ontological status on what we are experiencing. If we perceive it as authentic on an existential level, then it has another set of consequences on our psyche. For example, the case. Okay, the time is over. Lunch. And that's just that, because authenticity has something to do with identity, personal identity, and intentions, and intentionality in a philosophical way, while simulation maybe loses some of these elements. So if we are able to decide which one of these concepts we are in at the moment, maybe we can reflect also on the equivalence or not. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a cool way to put it. To me, I mean, speaking about ontology off the cuff is maybe not a good idea. We should think more carefully. But it seems to me that virtual reality is both simulation and it is authentic. So in the sense that it simulates, it's a computer-generated simulation of the space and the objects inside of it, so it is a simulation. But I think what happens there and the experiences that users have are completely authentic. So both seem to be true. Does it translate to realism? I think by realism, what Chalmers and company mean is that, well, it's no less real. So I think they would maybe disagree with the simulation claim. They would say it's not a simulation, it's just another reality, as real as ours. But to me, it sounds like it's both simulation and authentic, at least today. I might change my mind.
I see your point but I don't think it's realistic that it's psychologically realistic that people can decide, okay, I mean, you suffer in your dreams. I mean, I suffer terribly in my dreams. And then I wake up and say, but it's still suffering. So it's not like something you can you can flip, okay, I'm going to experience this as real, and I'm going to experience that as not real. That's not how the brain works, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. It wasn't about the realism of the experience. It was about thinking about these two concepts as tools we can use to reflect on the experience.
So, okay, yeah, thanks. So I think lots of you raised lots of things relevant to culture and how culture kind of shapes the way we enter VR. In particular, Katia's example, very interesting. So what I observed is not only culture shapes the way we experience VR, but there seems to be, now with social media and everything, there seems to be a culture that's not geographically kind of defined. There is the online culture, which kind of group you belong to. And I felt that's kind of almost, kind of a new thing we will have to learn how to deal with. But then that also actually, the point I'm trying to make here is, so as a parent, I have a 13-year-old boy who I felt we recently had the digital detox. We took everything away from him because he was having behavior issues at school. But then his kind of behavior completely changed after we've done that. Of course, he hated it, but I think his everyday behavior really improved. So as a parent, I think what I've learned, my concern from it, is I feel that adolescents nowadays, or even some adults, they are prioritizing the digital world to reality. And I think that actually is something that's quite concerning. I don't know if you guys watched the TV series Adolescents from the UK. That's more about social media than VR, right? So I think my question here is, what do you guys think about the danger of people actually prioritizing digital to reality? If that is maybe actually the future, we should embrace it. Or actually we have only one reality, we have to really protect it to prevent people from ever prioritizing digital over reality. So what are your thoughts?
For me, I don't think there'll be a contrast in the sense that there'll be one reality. I'm here in this physical room and I walk through the door and I'm in augmented reality where very little that I experience is physically real. I mean, that's my own personal view about how things will develop, and that people will kind of learn that this is, not even learn, implicitly know this is how the world is. Some things you touch will be physical and some your hand will go straight through. And when they go to sit on a chair, they'll always check that the chair is really there. So it's very difficult to separate the real and I think in the future, the real and the virtual, it will all be one reality, some of it virtual, some of it physical.
It's a very kind of old, interesting question about this, our preference for the real. So is there any intrinsic value in detoxing from the digital, removing everything, going back to the bare bone reality? And the famous Nozick experience machine, right, is about that. And I think he had this premise of nobody would plug into this experience machine, even though the experiences are very good, but it's not real. And we have a preference for the real. But that was in the 70s. And I think ever since, this preference for the real was going down, 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 and the intuition has changed. And I think now more and more people would say, yes, I would plug into the machine. So it is culture and time also relative.
So unfortunately, we have to close the panel discussion, but as I said, you will be with our panelists for today. So maybe just one word to conclude on this panel.
I can say one very quick thing, that I loved this panel. It was messy, no clear answers were discovered, and this is what I enjoyed, this is what I like. I think that's how it should be, live discussion, everybody thinking on their feet. Yeah. So thank you so much.
So, by the way, I recorded and we recorded the discussion. So if some of you are interested to participate into this white paper we want to put in 2 or 3 years from now, you are very welcome to contact us and we'll be happy to have your contribution. Mel, a few words?
Well, just very briefly, just as you said, I'm very happy to be in this panel and really enjoyed it. And for me, it's raised, but also maybe answered a lot of questions. Yeah.
Beatrice? Well, raised a lot of questions, known and unknown, but I think we have to, as I said, the contrast real, non-real is not going to get us very far because that's as old as the world. I mean, we can only focus on the dimensions of experience and trying to elucidate that more and more and not sort of work with the contrast, is this real or unreal? Because ultimately it's for experience. That,
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, and also I would like to say that it's important to have in this discussion also, given that we are in the Faculty of Law, I think it's very important to have interactions with those that are regulating or they know the laws in the real world, because it gives very rich perspectives that we never count on as neuroscientists or computer scientists and so on. So I think it's very interesting to have this view to enrich our consideration of the experiences and the consequences of the metaverse.
So maybe next time we could have a full session dedicated to this ethical question. Because so thank you for your participation, active participation. I give the Aurelio. Yeah.